Hey folks, and how are you doing today? Now, welcome to this episode of The Grow Show, and it's 2023, and I want to talk to you about HR today. Now, I've got Tracey Hudson, who's going to be joining us in just a second, and we're going to be talking about her journey into HR and how she's got there, a little bit about her background, but also what things she's talking to her clients about at the moment. And she's going to give you loads of useful tips about some of the changes in law that's happening at the moment, plus also stuff that you need to be aware of as an employer or employee. And we're just going to have a general chat. Now, this could descend into complete and utter chaos. So if it does, happy days. But Tracey, how are you doing today? How are you getting on?
I'm good. Should I be offended that you're already predicting this is going to descend into chaos?
Well, based on the pre-chat where we've had conversations about dogs falling off bikes, getting the year wrong, me not being able to say a fancy word, so me calling it changes in law, I think we kind of pitched it right.
Yeah. Okay.
We pitched it right. But for the people who don't know you, Tracey, tell us a little bit about you and how you help your clients on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm Tracey Hudson. I have 4 HR department franchises. So, predominantly in Warwickshire, but we've also got an office in Derbyshire. So we've got a bunch of clients around the Midlands, and we just help them navigate their people issues. So from legal compliance, writing contracts, handbooks, that sort of stuff, through to managing them whilst they're working for you, and then exiting people out of the business, whether that be, retirement, redundancies, they just leave. How dare they just want to leave you? Or sometimes we have to do dismissals, of course. That's what HR is associated with, isn't it? The negative stuff. So really anything that, a large corporate would do in their HR department, we do that, but for small businesses locally.
Lovely. And you say you got 4 franchises, which is fantastic. And I didn't actually realize you had 4 before you mentioned that. Can you talk to people who haven't got a clue what a franchise is, what a franchise is to start off with? Let's break it down to bare bones.
Yeah. So the HR department was set up by a woman called Sue Tumulty about 20 years ago, and she just set up her own business and created all the branding. So she's the brains behind all of the branding and the business model, and then she franchised it out. So I was one of the first franchisees nearly 18 years ago now, and so I can just use the HR department branding. The website is done for me. We've got loads of legal resources that are all there, and the best thing about it is that we now have, I think there's about 80 offices across the country. So we've got this huge network of phenomenal HR professionals, which is fantastic because between us, we've covered every industry. We've seen every scenario. We can't be shocked by anything. So it's a good way to build a business. I'm an advocate of franchises.
Love it. And I know a number of people who are part of franchises, and I know a number of businesses who have just started maybe in year 3 to 5, and actually they're looking to franchise their business and kind of expand from there. So it is a very good way of building a business and getting involved with a pre-existing business if you've got the skills to be able to do it. But how did you say you've been in the industry for 18 years, well, part of the HR department for 18 years. Yeah. Have you always been into HR before then? Did you have an interest in it?
Yeah, I've always done HR. I did business studies at university because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I still don't really know what I want to do when I grow up, if I'm being completely honest. And then I liked the HR modules. I liked the employment law stuff. I just kind of fell into it. And I've always done HR. My first job after university was a HR role, and I just really enjoy it. I'm good at it, so.
Good. That's what you kind of want. Yeah. If you enjoy it and you're good at it, then that's kind of the perfect Venn diagram, isn't it? That's still looks like right in the middle.
Yeah.
It is. So I'm really interested in terms of HR, and I can remember talking to someone about this, and it might have been yourself ages ago. But the conversation kind of went around to the point where, when do people need a HR department? So when do they need to HR help? And their principle and their kind of idea was that most people think about it too late. It's too far down the line. They should really think about HR at the start rather than when there's going to be an issue. Now, I'm going to direct the question at you because It might be the same, it might not be. But when do businesses need to outsource or get HR advice?
So our smallest client has got one employee. So I would say you need proper advice when you're first thinking about employing somebody. And when you run a business, when you go from self-employed, right, you're doing everything yourself, and then you think, I need some help. You're running yourself into the ground, so you want to take somebody on. Most people look towards people that they know, so family members or friends, and that's fine because it's taking somebody in that you trust. But the amount of family businesses that we have where families have absolutely been torn apart because they've fallen out about stuff, they're just not getting on, they don't like being told what to do, they're feeling disrespected. You know, we've got siblings where one is the MD and the other two siblings aren't, you know, don't feel that they're at a senior enough position, and they all fall out, and it's just
Sounds like a nightmare.
It's and it really can be a nightmare, because when it's family businesses, the business doesn't matter. It's your family. It's those relationships. So if you get it right from the start, it just makes life so much easier for later. So I don't mind when people say, "Oh, I recruited my friend. Oh, I've got this friend Dean, and I've taken him on, and he's great, and I trust him, and that's fine." Well, that's fine. But what happens when Dean does something wrong? What happens when he stops turning up to work? What happens when he starts taking advantage because you're his mate and he needs time off to do stuff? And then you get into, well, I can't, you know, how do I pay him? Do I knock his pay down? He's my mate. What do I do? We've got no contract. Well, we don't have a contract because we're friends. I don't know why I'm picking on someone called Dean. I don't even know somebody called Dean, but
I don't know any Deans, but it's a good example. And actually, it's one of those things where I can see the scenario playing out quite often, because it makes sense. You know, you if you're looking to get someone else into the business, you're going to look into your circle. You're going to look into your network, who you've got around you. And suddenly, actually, if your friend has got free time and he's got the skills, or she's got the skills to be able to kind of help, well, it makes sense. And you know, it's, for me, my business is just myself, but I know when I'm going to employ my first employee, I will get HR advice at that point, because I want to make sure everything is sorted. I want to make sure the contracts are sorted. I'm protected. They're protected. I haven't got a clue about kind of the tax side of getting an employer as well and all that stuff. And to be honest, I don't want to know that kind of stuff. I just want to pass it on to someone else who does know. But equally, I want to be protected, and I want them to be protected. And I think that, for me, sounds a sensible route to go down.
It's just, if, like, you don't want this sort of stuff keeping you awake at night, right? You're trying to run a business, you're trying to grow it, and people are the biggest asset in a business. But when there's a problem with somebody, it keeps you awake at night, because in a small business, those relationships are personal, and it always feels personal. So, you know, you need to know that you're doing the right thing. Employees are pretty, you know, they know their stuff. And the worst thing is when an employee goes to an employer and says, my rights are blah, 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 and you didn't know about it, or you've done the wrong thing, or you've asked the wrong question. Even in an interview, people ask the wrong questions. You know, we all know about the "are you married" stuff. You can't ask if they're married. You can't ask if anyone's planning to have children. But people make mistakes and ask about, oh, why were you out of work in that time? Oh, I had 2 years off because of my ill health. Oh, tell me more about that. And then you start going down a conversation about their ill health, and you come out of that interview going, well, I can't take them on because, you know, they had a period of depression and they were off for 2 years, so I can't risk that. You know, it's that sort of, then you've got a disability claim potentially waiting for you. So it's, if you've got HR support, you've got somebody to just talk this stuff through with, or even sit in on interviews with, when you're not employing your mates or your family. You know, the first employee I took on wasn't a friend or a family member. All my family are employed in the family business. I'm not. I've gone and often done my own thing. But you know, it's still, even I know what I'm doing, right? But it's still scary. And that first day, you're like, oh my gosh, I've got an employee. I've got a person. What do I do? And I remember I had 2 employees by the first Christmas that I started employing somebody. And I remember my biggest stress was, oh my gosh, we need to have a Christmas party, but there's only 3 of us. What do we do? Where do we go? It felt like this really big deal.
Yeah. Which I'm sure is probably kind of you ramping it up in your mind.
Yeah,
And for them, it was a case of, yeah, let's go out for a meal.
yeah, yeah,
But for you, it was looking after those people. It was
yeah,
making sure that they experienced that time of year. But saying that, you know, if you're looking at employees now, again, talking just as a sole trader here, but if you've got employees, you've got holidays and that kind of stuff that you need to look after as well.
yeah,
You know, that's a whole minefield. That's a whole minefield.
yeah,
How many days to give them and what, you know, all that stuff. So I think outsourcing that side of it straight away is definitely a
yeah.
good
And
idea.
like people will have come quite often. People have come from a corporate background, so they'll have their corporate handbook and they'll have their corporate contract, and they'll think they've got to offer these corporate benefits. So we'll start working with a client that have got a handful of employees, and we're like, why are you giving somebody 6 months sick pay? You can't afford that. You're a small business. And they're like, oh, well, I just thought you had to, because that's what happened in their previous corporate job, or that's what happened when they worked at the council, or whatever it is. So it's understanding, if you've not worked in an SME business before and you've got no experience of that, but you're starting up your own, you need to go to the people who do know SMEs so that they can guide you the right way. So we can guide you on what benefits are appropriate, what salaries are appropriate, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's not, being in an SME is not like working in a corporate business just on a smaller scale. It's not. It's completely different. SMEs are brilliant because they're agile. You can respond to anything. You can pivot when we have a lockdown really quickly and easily. Culture is so much better being in a small business rather than a big corporate. There's so many advantages to being in an SME, but it also means being in an SME, you don't get the big benefits that you do working in a corporate. It's just different. So it's good to get HR support first thing, because then you're getting it right and you're not making these big mistakes and having 6 months sick pay in an employment contract that you're then bound by, you know?
Yeah, I suppose also, once we've spoken a lot about the beginning process of getting the onboarding process, but if you haven't got those contracts in place, or if you have got the contract but it's the wrong contract, then actually you've already alluded to about getting the bad side, not the bad side, but not the nasty side, but the kind of the grievance and the kind of dismissal side of HR. With having all that stuff in place at the start, does it mean that actually everyone's on the same page in terms of what's expected of them going forward? So there's less kind of grievances and less dismissal stuff. Am I right in thinking that, or have I just made that up somehow?
No, you haven't made it up. So if it's really important, right, when you first take somebody on, you have a new employee, even if you've got a bigger team, you've got a new employee that comes into your business, and you need to set the tone. So in a small business, you're friendlier, you know, you've got a nice, cozy, family style culture. You don't have all these big benefits, but you've got certain ways of working, certain styles of working that you want people to know. So you want to set that out early on. And a big part of that is the contract. Now, the contract, you're going to write, they're going to sign it, and then you're never going to look at it again until there's a problem. So the challenge with writing an employment contract is that it's that you want all the rules in place, but small business owners don't like, they want to be friendly. You know, they don't want a list of rules like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. They want to have a contract that's a bit friendlier and a bit more welcoming. So there's just ways that you can write this stuff that make it sound more like you as a business rather than just some rubbish template document or something that you've stolen from corporate life. And if you have a handbook or you have policies, again, they need to reflect you and your way of working and your style and your culture. And if you've got, so for example, in a corporate, you'd have a disciplinary and grievance procedure. It's a legal right, it's a statutory right, you have to issue one to your employees. What we do is have a policy called resolving problems. So straight away, you've got that kind of corporate disciplinary and grievance, like, don't do all this stuff wrong. And then we have a resolving problems. So if something comes up, this is how we're going to deal with it. Hopefully it won't, but if it does, this is what we're going to do. So it's just a different approach. And then if you can start off with the kind of friendlier, more informal approach, then that will carry on. But if it doesn't match up, does it? If you have something like stern and rules and it's a technical term, then
it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's one of those kind of areas which, in my mind, straight away when you said about having contracts and not looking at it afterwards,
Mm,
I completely get that because
mm.
I've got contracts with many of my clients, and we won't ever look at them again
Yeah,
until there's an issue. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
true. And that's what you kind of do. But you changing that terminology and actually saying resolving issues and solving kind of grief, it just makes it, actually it's not necessarily a grand problem which is going to keep you up at night. Even if it is, then
yeah,
it doesn't seem it. It doesn't downplay it, but it still says there's a level of severity there.
yeah,
It's just that little play on it, isn't it?
yeah. But then
It's really good to know.
there's some really critical stuff that when we work with a new client, especially if they've got their contracts drafted, oh, well, maybe they've stolen them from corporate, for example.
Do you
They'll
find that quite often that people do
Yeah,
steal them from previous stuff?
they've stolen them. Yeah, they've pulled out their contract from when they were a finance director at some, I don't know, massive corporate, and then they've thought this will do, and they've used that, and and it drives me nuts. The reason it drives me nuts is that corporates tend to have contractual policies, which means that you can't change things, and that includes contractual disciplinary policies. So if you have somebody legally, you can dismiss somebody in the first 2 years of their employment, as long as there's no discrimination issues. You can dismiss somebody in the first 2 years. If you've got a contractual disciplinary policy, you've got to jump through loads of hoops. If you're in a small business and somebody's not working out, they might have passed their probation, whatever. Everyone's perfect in their probation. Anyone can be brilliant for 3 months. And then you get to 6 months and actually their attitude's starting to stink a bit, and they're not turning up, and they're having loads of time off, and it's always Mondays because they're hungover from the weekend or whatever. It's just not quite working out. In a small business, you just need to move that person on, recruit somebody else, and crack on. And when you have contractual disciplinary procedures, there's hoops that you've got to jump through, steps that you've got to go, meetings that you've got to have to be able to do that. And that's what frustrates me, is if we work with the client right from day one, we can make sure that this stuff is all in place and it's sorted, so that when there's a problem, we can resolve it really quickly for them. When we take on a client that have got some stuff in place and it is stuff that they've nicked from elsewhere, it's very rarely appropriate, which means we've got to go through a process of changing contracts so that so it enables them to do it. So I'm not saying it's not fixable. It's just a hassle for me. It's a hassle for me, and the world revolves around me. So I wish everyone would just come to me first.
It makes sense. To be fair, if they do that though, it will make it easy for them in the long run as well. So it doesn't
It
just make it
will,
easy for you; it makes it easy for them as well.
yeah.
So that makes sense. It does. Now, if we got people listening to this podcast and video, and they have stolen, well, they have taken the contract from someone else, and it has got all these disciplinary stuff that they don't need and all that kind of stuff. How easy is it to fix?
It's relatively easy. It's just an admin nightmare. So I mean, not so much if you've got, like what I was saying, 6 months company sick pay, then we're talking about consulting with staff to get rid of it, and that's a very difficult process. But if it's just terminology, then usually you don't get much comeback from employees, and at least you're getting it right with new employees. So even if we can't get you out of your old contracts, when you take on new as you're growing your business, we'll get it right. So yeah, it's not always a really easy fix. It's just about what you do moving forwards.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And talking about moving forward, there's some changes in law at the moment that we're going to kind of talk about now, which I think people need to know about. People need to understand and people need to know about. So what are they? And yeah, let's talk about the changes in law. What are they, and what are people going to be dealing with in 2023?
I might start ranting a bit, Gary, so you might have to shut
That's
me
fine.
up.
That's fine.
Because bear in mind, I come at this from an SME point of view. I'm all about small business. I don't care about the corporates. They've got loads of resources. They can crack on and do what they like. I think with everything, I think about small business. So there's a change coming up, which is around flexible working applications. So right now, if you've got an employee and they've worked for you for 6 months, they can submit a flexible working application, and you've got to consider that. And there's a list of reasons that you have to comply with if you wanted to reject it. It's a formal process. It's fine. It works. The government are changing the process and changing the entitlements. So it means that anyone who starts working for you from day one, they can submit a flexible working request, and you've got to go through the process to consider it. And not only can they submit a flexible working request, they can do it twice every year now. So this is going to be an admin nightmare. At the moment, you can only submit one request a year, but now you'll be able to do it twice. So technically, every 6 months, somebody could be asking to change how they work. And the other thing is that when an employee has to submit a request, what you have to do now is consider the impact of that request on your employer. So if you decide, right, I want to work 3 days a week instead of 5, in the form that you have to fill out to submit this request, there's a box that says, how will this impact your colleagues, your team, your employer? How will it impact the business? How will you deliver your work? How are we going to get around that? With the way the legislation is changing, they don't have to consider the impact on the employer. And this really annoys me. I'm going to try not to swear, Gary. It really frustrates me because in a small business, if somebody says that they want to change their location of work, they want to change their working hours, you've got to consider the business. It's a small business. Saying to employees, oh, don't worry, you don't have to consider the impact on the business, it's just ridiculous. It's not common sense. And I understand, right? When you're employed, it's different than being a business owner. And I get that. You're employed. Most people are just on a salary. They want to come in, do their job, go home, not think about it too much. Their priority isn't growth of the business. Their priority isn't about thinking about sustainability of the business in the longer term, stability for all the employees. They're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about themselves. So this is great for employees because it is just completely focused on them. But for a business owner, I think the reason it makes me so frustrated is because it's the government trying to legislate how entrepreneurs in this country have their staff working, dictate where they work and how they work. And that's my problem. And, what we really need in this country are people encouraged to be entrepreneurial, start businesses, have a great idea, be innovative, and have a team around them that can do that. And a challenge that we've had since lockdown, that I know a lot of businesses have had, because we've had a lot of conversations with clients about it, is that in lockdown, everyone got used to being at home. And a lot of people really enjoyed that. I'm really lucky with my team in that they wanted to be back in the office. And as soon as we all came back into the office, the more junior members of the team, they just started thriving. Because when we're all at home in lockdown, they're not listening to the more senior people in the team. They're not listening to the other senior advisors on how they're talking to clients and what they're doing. And their development slowed. Like, they did their absolute best, but their development slowed. Since we've been back, it's just been like that. Like, it's been brilliant. And they all wanted to come back in. And we work so well together. When we're in an office, you can bat ideas off each other. In HR, there are a million ways to resolve a problem. So if a client phones and it's something that's a bit tricky, we can all just sit around and go, right, how are we going to deal with this one? And just bat ideas around. And it's harder to do that when you're at home. And small businesses, I think, need to be together. And I'm all for flexibility. Someone's coming to service the boiler, I need to be at home that afternoon. Fine, be at home, doesn't matter. But to have the government dictate where and how our employees work, I think it's a slippery slope. And that's what I'm getting. I did warn you, I was in a bit of a ranty mood, Gary.
And it's one of those things where I haven't heard about this legislation. See, I can't say the word, but I haven't heard
it. You just kind of said it. If you hadn't brought attention to it, I'd have thought you just said legislation.
Correct. But as soon as you when you started talking about it and said that there's a box that says about how will it affect your colleagues in the business, at that point I thought that's great, because in my mind that really shines the light on the impact of your decisions on the other people, which is fantastic. And then you said about it being removed. And I thought to myself, what the hell? Why are they removing that? Because that, for me, is, anything that we do when we're working around people. And how you could be a sole trader going into another business being freelance. It's the same principle. Your actions affect them and they
Yeah.
impact you. So you need to be aware of what other people are doing. So as soon as you said about them removing that, I thought, that doesn't sound quite right. But and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if you've got the right people in your business, and they've got the right motivations, the right motives, and you've got the right culture inside it, that's building them and developing them, and they would automatically think about what their impact, how they're going to impact the business by changing their stuff. If you've got the right people there, so
Yeah.
is this going to play into the favor of the people who haven't got the contracts right, the people who haven't got the right people in place, more than the other people who have got everything in place and all sorted?
So this is all down to culture. That's exactly it. It's all down to culture. So for me personally, I'm not worried about this legislation because the culture in our business and our team, everyone's attitude is great. We're all working towards the same goal. Everyone is really committed. They're motivated. They're driven. Like, their customer service standards are so high, and they all want to develop professionally. So we've got the right people in our team. And I think the problems come when you have somebody who isn't quite on the bus with you. So if you've got a great team, but then you've got someone who's not quite there, and they're not working as hard as everyone else, they're not as enthusiastic as everyone else, that can really drag other people down. And so for small businesses, you've got to deal with that quick, because if somebody's not right, or they're starting to hold the others back, you've just got to deal with it quickly. You can't have that. That is so toxic, and it will just get worse. So you've got to understand what it is that's going on with that person. Has there been a change? Did they start off all enthusiastic, and now all of a sudden they've stopped? And people are talking about quiet quitting quite a lot. Have you heard of? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have,
Quiet
yeah.
quitting.
I've heard of the term, because I've heard different people talk about it in different podcasts. For the people
Yeah.
who haven't heard about it, how would you describe quiet quitting?
So quiet quitting is where you don't resign from your job. You don't actually quit, but you just kind of do the minimum that you need to do. Take the money, do your 9 to 5, do what you need to do. You don't do, you're not putting your hand up to take on those extra projects. You're not kind of engaging with the team as much. So you're kind of losing that team player bit. Just kind of stepping back from it. And that's, that can be from different reasons. That can be, I don't feel like I'm appreciated in what I do, so why should I bother making the effort? It might be that they've got stuff going on outside. Maybe they've got young kids and they're just absolutely exhausted, and work is the last thing on their mind. Maybe they've got elderly parents who need care. Maybe there's stuff going on outside of work. It's got nothing to do with work, but it's just that work is the lowest priority. And so that's what I mean by quiet quitting, just kind of stepping back from it all. Now, in our business, we've got a really good structure, really good relationships with the team. I mean, we have to. We're a HR business.
Yeah.
But I am, in terms of being a leader, I'm relatively relaxed. I trust people until they give me reason not to trust them, which means I trust all of my team. And that's two-way, I don't, if someone says to me, I need to work from home a couple of days next week, yeah, fine, it doesn't matter. That's fine. Just do what you need to do. As long as the client's happy, we're happy. That's fine. And so we've got quite a relaxed environment, and people know that if there's a problem, we'll support them with whatever they need to get through it.
So what you're really talking about is it's all about communication. It's all about the communication between you as an employer, but also about the employees.
Yeah.
But that begs the question, how important is the communication? Because when it comes to quiet quitting, there can be a breakdown of communication between the two, where, as you said before, if people are having issues at home or they need to look after a relative, but they don't want to say it to their employee, there's that kind of breakdown of communication there. So how important is communication in that kind of dynamic?
It's absolutely critical. And, it doesn't have to be like formal stuff. We have one-to-one meetings with everyone in the team. They have a one-to-one meeting with their manager every month. And in those meetings, yeah, you can talk about workload, how you're doing with stuff, anything that you're particularly struggling with, catch up on projects, but also the kind of, how are you? What's going on? Oh, you talked about your nan wasn't very well. How's she doing? That sort of, I mean, you naturally talk about this stuff in the office, the normal chats.
Yep.
What did you do weekend stuff, or this happened or whatever. So you kind of naturally know what's going on, but having carved out time, like even if it's just 30 minutes once a month with your employees, where they know that this is 30 minutes, that is time that you are devoting to them, and it's got to be really protected time. So one-to-ones can't be, oh, I'm really busy, can we push that back to another day? Like, it's got to be protected time, so they know, right, I've got half an hour then, this is an opportunity for me to talk to my manager about whatever it is that's going on. So having those opportunities are really important. And what I see happening a lot is you have business owners that are just too busy. And you've got employees who respect those business owners, knowing they're really busy, so don't want to bother them. But then what you've got is, you're trying to respect each other's time. Business owners like, I'm working really hard because I'm building this business and this is where your career is going to be. And you've got an employee who's going, oh God, they're really busy. I'm just not going to interrupt them. So I'll just go and find another job. That's the last thing you want as a business owner.
Yeah.
But that's your fault. Like, if your people are leaving, that is your fault. So you have to do something about it. And, when people do leave, it's bizarre to me that people don't do exit interviews. So, and often it's because the business owners don't really want to know. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear, I'm not happy with my pay. They don't want to hear, you never have any time for me. They don't want to hear, I've got no opportunity to progress my career. They don't want to hear, oh, this job allows me to work 4 days a week and you're making me work 5 days a week. They don't want to hear it. And I have these conversations with business owners all the time. Why did that person leave? Oh, it was because they were no good at blah, 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 and they thought we'd find out. Or, oh, it was because they couldn't cope with the pressure. It's never anything. It takes a very strong leader to actually sit there and go, right, what could I do better this time? What do I need? What could I have done differently? What do I need to change to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because we've just lost a really good person. There's always kind of excuses. And that's an ego thing, right? That's an ego thing. And it is hard. No one wants to hear criticism about their business because your business is your baby. But at the same time, if you can't hear it, it's never going to change. And culture is so important. And you have some, really traditional firms who have always operated that way, and it's always been fine. And our culture is this, built on tradition, and we're going to have 9 to 5 and people are going to be in the office and we're going to use pen and paper and no, we're not having Teams meetings. Everything's got to be in person. And actually, when you're recruiting in millennials who don't want to do stuff in person, they don't want to, like, no one wants to waste time sitting in the car. I mean, look at us, Gary, right? We're doing a podcast. This is fine. We're getting on great. We've had a lovely catch up. It's been brilliant. Would it be any better that we were together? We could have had a hug.
True. We could have had a hug. It could have been one of those. It's a different dynamic doing it online than it is on there, which you've already alluded to by saying about your employees' development over that kind of course of lockdown.
Yeah.
You do learn so much by it being in the same room as people, even by the conversations in between those conversations that people are having. People say
what I hear is managers not having conversations with their employees because they're going to wait till we're together. Oh, they never come into the office anymore, so I can't talk to them. Like, why are they not coming into the office anymore?
And then you've got that breakdown in communication, and then you've got potential to quiet quitting going on. It's all feeding into the same vicious circle.
And then the other thing that we've got is, particularly with much younger people who started their first job in lockdown. So, the way they met their team was all on a screen, and they've been working there for 18 months. And then going into the office feels really terrifying. They've never done it before, but they've worked there for 18 months, but they've never gone into the office. So we had to deal with so many employees who had huge anxieties, not necessarily from COVID or worrying about catching anything. It was just this is my first ever job. What do you do? Where do I go? Who do I report to? I've worked here for 18 months. Do I need a pass? Do I bring my own tea and coffee? Like all these real basics. There's a whole chunk of people that have missed out on all of that stuff. So actually, but employers just thinking, oh God, well, we recruited them when we were in lockdown. They just want to stay working from home. So they must be really difficult. We told them that it was an office-based job, but they're not having those conversations. You can have these conversations online when it's one-to-one. It's fine. Like collaborative working, I'm all for people being in the office. But when you've got, like, going back to the original question around culture, you've got to look at that. Business owners have got to look at it. They need to be doing staff surveys. What do your teams want? What do they want in terms of benefits? You know, we kind of did a team survey a couple of years ago now, and we found out loads of the benefits that we were offering. The team didn't really care about, and I was horrified. It's like, it's costing us a fortune and they don't care. But actually now I know what they care about because we did the survey. And then after the survey, it was an anonymous, can't say that. It was an anonymous survey. So we don't know who responded to what bits, but there were some themes. So we had a team meeting, we talked about these themes, and we changed so much stuff. We brought in a profit share scheme. Like, we didn't know that they were even that interested in terms of the finances and all of that sort of stuff. And they're all over it. And so we brought in a profit share scheme. So now they're like really conscious about costs, what we're spending, because they want to get their bonuses. Totally understandable. But if we hadn't have asked the questions, we would never have known that. And so it just fathoms me, like, why business owners aren't talking to their staff. And usually it's because they don't know where to start, because they got people based at home, or they don't know what questions to ask. Yeah, this is why you need HR support. We know what questions to ask. We can ask the questions.
It makes sense. And one thing that's really kind of come out of this whole kind of interview, we've been talking for about 30, 35 minutes at the moment, and we can talk forever about this, is about the importance of culture, communication, and really just understanding the processes behind everything. It is. And by the sounds of it, if you've got the processes in place, and that starts with the contracts and the onboarding, and then you've got the communication, and then you've got the culture that's breeding it all there. What you find is actually you do have those open conversations where people are happy to talk to you about their issues that you've got. You know, when you mentioned about the 30 minutes of 30-minute one-to-ones that you have, which are non-negotiable, you've got to do it, and you don't rearrange it, it's got to be done. That to me makes perfect sense, because you've got to carve out that time. And how, as a kind of a freelancer, as a solo entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, I know that I've got clients who I would consider sometimes too busy to talk to me, but that information is really important, so I need to talk to them. And if I feel like that going into a CEO of a company and saying, do you know what, we just need to carve out 5 minutes now and just have a little chat. And if I'm feeling the pressure for doing that, what are employees feeling? It's that kind of thing. So I kind of get it. And just on the side note, exit interviews are also good, not only for employees to employers, but also for freelancers as well, with their ex-clients as well, because you find out so much information from that. And actually, do you know what? As you've already mentioned with the surveys, if you've got the information, then you can do something about it. If you haven't got the information, you're going to be blind in the dark. You can't see what they want or what you want. And actually, it just gives you so much more direction. So I have loved this chat, loved this whole chat. Is there anything else that you kind of want to add at this point? Because we've covered a hell of a lot over the last kind of bit of time that we've been talking.
We've covered loads, and I could do loads more, so I'm going to just shut up.
Well, I'll tell you what, if people wanted to find out more information or have a chat with you or connect with you on socials, how can they, Tracey? How can they connect with you as a person, but also the HR department?
Okay, so they can email me, tracy@hrdep.co.uk. I'm all over LinkedIn, so get onto LinkedIn and find me. There's a load of funded HR support available at the moment. If for businesses that have got a CV postcode, then get in touch with me, because there's some funded HR support, so I can talk you through that. That's it. Send me a message.
So send her a message. When she says she's all over LinkedIn, she is actually all over LinkedIn. She's really good on LinkedIn. So
that's what I said. I'm all over LinkedIn.
You're all over LinkedIn. You're all over LinkedIn. But no, Tracey, thank you so much for your advice today. I always ask my people and my guests one last question, which changes fairly often, but with this one, I think it's quite apt. And that is, what is the one thing you would recommend anyone doing today to help them improve their HR processes, services, whatever it is inside their business?
Do a staff survey. The end. That'll tell you everything you need to know.
Brilliant. Do a staff survey, get it sorted. So
Yeah.
if you are watching this and you have no idea, connect with Tracey. Please, please, please have a chat with her. And for everybody watching and listening, thank you so much. Tracey, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's great to catch up with you, as always. And for everyone watching, cheers, folks. And I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.